My name is Alina Wilson, 34 years old, and for 12 years, I dedicated my heart and soul to Apex Solutions. I built our client relationships, delivered consistent results, and never missed a deadline. So when Richard, our new boss, called me into his office that Tuesday, I was stunned by his words. "You are overpaid for what you do. 25% pay reduction, effective immediately." I smiled politely. I understand completely, because as I walked out of his office, I already knew exactly what I would do next. If you are watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from, and hit that like and subscribe button while I tell you how I handled the biggest betrayal of my professional life. My journey with Apex Solutions began right after college. I started as an entry-level marketing coordinator, making coffee runs and formatting PowerPoint presentations. Back then, I was just grateful for the opportunity. The company was smaller, about 30 employees total, and everyone knew each other. We were like a family, celebrating birthdays with cake in the break room and helping each other meet deadlines. Those early years taught me the fundamentals of our business and showed me what workplace support could look like. Over the years, I worked my way up through 4 promotions to become a senior marketing specialist. My role became increasingly specialized, focusing on our highest value accounts. I developed expertise in healthcare industry marketing, which made up 60% of our client base. My colleagues often came to me for advice on complex regulatory compliance issues for medical device marketing campaigns. This specialized knowledge took years to develop and became my greatest professional asset. Among our clients, Chambers Industries stood out as our crown jewel. The medical device manufacturer represented 40% of our company revenue through their ongoing marketing campaigns and special projects. Their owner, Harriet Chambers, was a formidable businesswoman in her 60s who had built her company from the ground up. She trusted very few people with her marketing vision, and for the past 7 years, I had been her primary contact at Apex. "Alina understands what we need before we even articulate it," Harriet once told my previous boss, Janet Collins. That comment led to my last promotion and a 16% raise 3 years ago. Janet was the kind of boss everyone dreams of having. She recognized talent, developed her team members, and shared credit generously. Under her leadership, I felt valued and motivated to excel. When she announced her retirement last year after 27 years with the company, I was genuinely happy for her, but worried about the transition. "Change can be good, Alina," Janet reassured me during her farewell lunch. "Fresh perspectives keep companies innovative." I tried to embrace her optimism. After all, change is inevitable in business. What I could not have anticipated was just how dramatic that change would be. 2 weeks after Janet retired, our CEO Bradley Wilson introduced our new director, Richard Phillips. Richard came from a competitor with a reputation for aggressive cost-cutting and rapid growth. Bradley had been appointed by the board after our company was acquired by Monarch Corporation, a larger marketing conglomerate, 18 months earlier. The acquisition had already brought subtle shifts in our company culture, with more emphasis on quarterly profits and less on the long-term client relationships that had been our hallmark. Richard was 42, tall with an expensive haircut and custom suits. He spoke confidently about modernizing our approach and streamlining operations during his introduction to the team. I noticed immediately how he made direct eye contact with Bradley during his speech, almost as if the rest of us were merely an audience to his performance for the CEO. Still, I was determined to make the best of the situation. "Change does not have to be negative," I reminded myself, channeling Janet's wisdom. I prepared a detailed briefing document for Richard about our key accounts, especially Chambers Industries, highlighting our strategies and successes. When I emailed it to him, his response was a brief, "Thanks, we'll review when I can." I did not think much of it at the time. New leaders are busy establishing themselves, I reasoned. He would recognize the value of institutional knowledge eventually. What I did not share with my colleagues was my personal stake in maintaining stability. My mother, Diana, had suffered a stroke 2 years earlier and required expensive, specialized care. At 68, Her medical costs were substantial even with insurance, and as her only child, I had taken on the responsibility of supplementing her retirement income. The promotion and raise Janet had secured for me had been a financial lifeline, allowing me to move my mother to a better care facility closer to my apartment. Every Sunday I would visit her, bringing fresh flowers and news from the office. "How is the new boss working out?" she asked shortly after Richard arrived. "Still getting adjusted," I told her, keeping my growing concerns to myself. My mother had always worried about me more than herself. Even partially paralyzed on her left side, she would notice the slightest tension in my voice and become anxious. I wanted to protect her from unnecessary worry, especially since her doctors had warned that stress could impact her recovery. The early warning signs about Richard were subtle but unmistakable. During my first presentation to him about the Chambers account, he interrupted me repeatedly, questioning basic strategy decisions that had been proven successful over years. "This approach seems outdated," he commented, waving dismissively at the slide showing our content marketing funnel. "Healthcare marketing is moving toward more aggressive conversion tactics." I tried to explain that Harriet Chambers specifically valued our educational approach that built trust before pushing sales messages, but Richard cut me off. "I have worked with 3 major medical device companies. Trust me. They all respond to the same incentives," he said, despite the fact that Chambers Industries had explicitly rejected such approaches in the past. I left that meeting uneasy, but told myself to be patient. New leaders often want to put their stamp on things. He would understand our clients better with time. I could not have been more wrong. The first clear sign that Richard was not simply bringing fresh perspectives came during our monthly client strategy meeting. I had prepared a comprehensive analysis of our latest campaign performance for Chambers Industries, showing a 22% increase in qualified leads generated. When I began my presentation, Richard interrupted almost immediately. "Before Alina continues, I want to highlight some changes we will be implementing," he said, standing up and effectively taking over the meeting. He proceeded to present slides I had never seen before, outlining a completely different strategic direction than what we had discussed with the client. More disturbing was how he framed these ideas. "As I was explaining to the team last week, our approach needs modernization," he said, presenting my own recommendations from previous months as if they were his recent innovations. Bradley, the CEO, nodded approvingly while I sat there, feeling increasingly invisible. When I tried to add context about client preferences, Richard smiled tightly and said, "We can discuss the details offline, Alina. Let us stick to the high-level strategy for now." By the end of that meeting, it was clear that Richard was positioning himself as the visionary while relegating me to an implementation role. The strategy he presented was fundamentally mine, but stripped of nuance and client-specific customizations that made it effective. I had become background furniture in a room where I used to lead discussions. The following week, Richard called me into his office to realign responsibilities. He informed me that he would be taking over direct management of several key accounts, leaving me with only Chambers Industries and 2 smaller clients. "This will allow you to focus more deeply on fewer accounts," he explained, as if doing me a favor. "I need to get more personally involved with our client relationships." I nodded professionally while mentally calculating that he had just removed 60% of my portfolio. The accounts he took were ones I had nurtured for years, building strong relationships with decision-makers who trusted my guidance. That same afternoon, I discovered I had been removed from the invitation list for the quarterly planning meeting, a session where account strategies were aligned with company goals. When I inquired about the omission, Richard's administrative assistant, Tiffany, looked uncomfortable. Richard said to include only team members who are directly involved in strategic planning, she explained apologetically. The message was clear. My role was being systematically diminished. But why? My performance reviews had been consistently excellent, and my accounts showed some of the strongest growth metrics in the company. The picture became clearer when I noticed Richard beginning to hire new team members. Kyle Bennett, a 27-year-old with only 3 years of experience, was brought in as a senior strategy consultant at a salary I knew must be at least 20% higher than mine, based on comments he made about his new apartment in the exclusive Westwood district. Kyle was talented and energetic, but lacked the deep industry knowledge that took years to develop. Yet Richard featured him prominently in client meetings and executive presentations. Kyle brings fresh thinking unconstrained by outdated methodologies, Richard explained during one meeting, while glancing meaningfully at me and Amanda Taylor, another experienced team member in her late 30s. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Richard was systematically sidelining employees who had been with the company longer than 5 years, particularly those over 35. Amanda and I began having lunch together, comparing notes on our experiences. He asked me yesterday if I was comfortable with the new project management software, Amanda confided. When I said I had been using it for months, he seemed disappointed, like he was looking for evidence that I could not adapt to new technology. Things escalated when I overheard a conversation between Richard and Bradley while working late one evening. Their voices carried from the conference room as I was gathering my things to leave. The legacy staff is the biggest obstacle to our margin targets, Richard was saying. Their compensation is based on an outdated structure from before the acquisition. Monarch is expecting a 15% improvement in our profit margins this quarter, Bradley replied. Do what you need to do. Just make sure we keep the key client relationships stable. Trust me, Richard assured him. By the time we are done trimming the fat, we will have a leaner operation with minimal client disruption. I slipped out without them noticing my presence, my heart pounding. I was the fat they planned to trim. My years of dedication and institutional knowledge were now liabilities rather than assets in their calculation. That night, I barely slept. My apartment, usually my sanctuary, felt suffocating as I paced the living room considering my options. I had a mortgage, my mother's medical expenses, and a job market that often viewed experienced professionals as overqualified or too expensive. The next morning, I arrived early and tried to speak with Richard about my concerns. I feel like I am being sidelined, I said directly. I would appreciate understanding how my role is evolving so I can better contribute to our new direction. Richard leaned back in his chair, a practiced look of concern on his face. I think you are being a bit sensitive, Elena. Every company goes through transitions. Change can be difficult for employees who are accustomed to the old ways of doing things. The condescension in his tone was unmistakable. I was being cast as resistant to change, rather than legitimately concerned about being marginalized. I have always adapted to new directions, I countered. My performance metrics show that consistently. Performance metrics evolve too, he replied smoothly. What was considered exceptional before might just be baseline expectations now. Monarch has different standards. I left his office feeling gaslighted and increasingly anxious. My concerns had been dismissed as emotional reactions, rather than legitimate professional observations. The following day, my friend Brooke Patterson from accounting stopped by my desk, her expression serious. I should not be telling you this, she whispered, but I just processed preliminary budget forecasts for next quarter. There are significant compensation reductions coded for your department. Layoffs? I asked, my stomach tightening. Not exactly. It looks like position reclassifications and salary adjustments. Be prepared, Elena. I have seen this playbook before at my last company before they restructured. Her warning confirmed my worst fears. The question was no longer if my position would be impacted, but when and how severely. I began updating my resume that evening, while still performing my job impeccably. If nothing else, I would not give Richard the satisfaction of documenting any performance issues. My professional pride demanded that much, even as I prepared for the worst. 2 weeks after Brooke's warning, the moment I had been dreading arrived. Tiffany called to inform me that Richard wanted to see me at 11:30. Her tone was overly neutral, a telltale sign that something unpleasant was coming. I spent the morning finalizing a campaign report for Chambers Industries, determined to maintain my professional standards regardless of what was coming. At 11:28, I closed my laptop, straightened my blazer, and took a deep breath before walking to Richard's office. His door was open, but I knocked anyway, a small assertion of professional courtesy that he rarely extended to others. Come in, Elena, he said, not looking up from his computer screen. Close the door behind you. Already the power dynamic was being established. He continued typing for nearly a minute while I stood there, before finally turning his attention to me. It was a small but deliberate tactic to reinforce his authority. Have a seat, he finally said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. I noticed Thomas Green from Human Resources sitting quietly in the corner, his presence confirming this was not a routine meeting. Richard folded his hands on his desk, leaning forward slightly. As you know, Apex is undergoing significant organizational changes since the Monarch acquisition. We are realigning all positions to be consistent with the broader corporate structure. His language was straight from the corporate restructuring playbook, impersonal and designed to make what was coming sound like an inevitable business decision rather than a targeted action. After careful evaluation of market rates and internal equity considerations, we have determined that your position has been compensated above appropriate levels for the responsibilities involved. I kept my expression neutral, though I could feel heat rising in my face. 12 years of dedicated service reduced to being an accounting discrepancy. Richard slid a document across the desk. Effective next pay period, your position is being reclassified from senior marketing specialist to marketing associate, with a corresponding salary adjustment of 25% reduction. 25%. A quarter of my income gone with a stroke of a pen. My mortgage payment, my mother's care facility, my carefully balanced financial life suddenly thrown into chaos. You are overpaid for what you do. 25% pay reduction, effective immediately, Richard continued, his tone suggesting he was being reasonable. In today's market, your position and skill set simply do not command the premium Janet authorized 3 years ago. The mention of Janet felt like salt in the wound, a deliberate reminder that my previous advocate was gone, and with her, any recognition of my true value. The marketing landscape has evolved significantly, he continued. Experience with traditional methods needs to be balanced with digital native capabilities and agile campaign development. Your skill set, while valuable in certain contexts, represents an older approach that does not align with our future direction. The implication was clear. At 34, I was being characterized as outdated. My experience framed as obsolescence rather than expertise. It was textbook age discrimination, thinly veiled behind corporate jargon. Furthermore, the specialized nature of your client relationships, while previously considered an asset, creates dependency risks for the organization. We need to diversify client contact points to ensure business continuity. Translation: my strong relationship with Harriet Chambers was threatening to Richard. He wanted to insert himself between me and our most valuable client. Thomas from HR finally spoke. This adjustment brings your compensation in line with similar positions across Monarch's subsidiaries. You should know that several roles are being similarly realigned. His rehearsed explanation did nothing to soften the reality that my livelihood was being slashed while younger. Less experienced employees like Kyle were being hired at premium rates. We will need your signature acknowledging the change, Richard said, sliding another document forward along with a pen. Of course. You are free to consider whether the new terms meet your career objectives. The implicit threat was clear. Accept the cut or leave. He knew my options were limited, especially given the specialized nature of my experience and the current job market for professionals in their 30s. I do not remember what my face looked like in that moment. 12 years of service, and I was getting a pay cut. Inside, I felt a mixture of rage, humiliation, and panic. But outwardly, I remained composed. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. I understand completely, I said, taking the pen. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. I signed where indicated, my signature betraying none of the turmoil inside me. I appreciate your professionalism, Elena, Richard said, his tone suggesting he had expected tears or protests. I am confident you will continue to make valuable contributions in your adjusted role. As I stood to leave, he added, I will be joining your next meeting with Harriet Chambers. It is time I became more directly involved with our key accounts. Of course. This was never just about cutting costs. It was about Richard inserting himself with our biggest client. using my established relationship as a stepping stone for his own advancement. Cut my compensation, take credit for my client relationships, and score points with the CEO by reducing expenses. A tidy package of corporate ambition at my expense. I walked out of his office with my head high, aware of curious glances from colleagues who could sense something significant had happened. Brooke caught my eye from across the room, her expression questioning. I gave a slight shake of my head and continued to the restroom. Once inside a stall, I finally allowed myself a moment of raw emotion. Tears of anger, not sadness, burned behind my eyes. My hands trembled slightly as I texted Brooke. 25% cut. Reclassification. Her response came immediately. Those bastards. My place after work. Wine emergency. I splashed cold water on my face, reapplied my makeup, and straightened my blazer. I had clients to serve, work to complete, and most importantly, a strategy to develop, because while Richard thought he had just secured an easy win, he had fundamentally misunderstood something crucial about me. I did not survive 12 years in a competitive industry by giving up when challenged, and I certainly did not build relationships with powerful clients like Harriet Chambers without learning a thing or two about strategic thinking. As I returned to my desk, I felt something unexpected beneath the anger and humiliation. A cold, clear sense of purpose. Richard had just made the biggest professional mistake of his career. He just did not know it yet. That evening, I sat in Brooke's living room, a glass of Cabernet in hand, finally letting the full reality of my situation sink in. The apartment felt like a safe space to process what had happened, away from the watchful eyes of colleagues and the sterile environment of the office. 25%, I repeated, still struggling to believe it. How am I supposed to maintain my mortgage and my mother's care on 75% of my salary? Brooke, ever practical, had already pulled out a legal pad. First, let us look at the numbers. What are your essential expenses? What can be cut or deferred? We spent the next hour creating a detailed budget analysis. The results were sobering. Even eliminating all discretionary spending, I would be short approximately $600 each month. My emergency savings would cover about 4 months before I would need to make drastic changes, potentially moving my mother to a less expensive facility. This is exactly what they want, Brooke said, refilling our glasses. Financial pressure forces people to quit. Saving the company severance costs and unemployment insurance increases. I cannot afford to quit without another job lined up, I said. And finding a comparable position could take months in this market. So you stay and fight, Brooke replied. But smartly. She was right. Emotion would not serve me now. I needed strategy and patience. Tell me everything you know about Richard's background and motivations, I asked. Brooke, with her position in accounting, had access to information I did not. She explained that Richard had been hired with a substantial salary and bonus structure tied directly to cost reduction and profit margin improvements. The quarterly executive reports show he has promised a 17% departmental cost reduction within 6 months. Your salary was likely one of the larger targets. We talked until after midnight, developing a multi-pronged approach to my situation. By the time I left, I had a clear action plan that would guide me through the coming weeks. The next day, I began methodical documentation of everything. I created a secure cloud folder with records of all my contributions, client feedback, performance reviews, and financial results generated by my accounts. I made copies of all emails where Richard had taken credit for my work or excluded me from meetings. I recorded dates, times, and witnesses to potentially discriminatory comments about outdated approaches and legacy staff. In parallel, I consulted with Nancy Rodriguez, an employment attorney recommended by a college friend. During our consultation, I laid out the situation in detailed, factual terms. This has the hallmarks of potential age discrimination, Nancy confirmed after reviewing my materials. The pattern of sidelining experienced employees while hiring younger, less experienced staff at higher compensation rates is problematic. However, Proving discrimination can be challenging, and litigation is a long, expensive road with no guaranteed outcome. She recommended continuing to document everything while exploring other options. Your strongest leverage may actually be your client relationships, particularly with Chambers Industries. If that relationship is as valuable as you describe, it could provide more immediate pressure than legal threats. Nancy's advice aligned with my instincts. A legal battle would be a last resort, potentially career-damaging regardless of outcome. The most effective strategy would work within the system while protecting my professional reputation. I also discovered I was not alone in my situation. Through careful conversations with trusted colleagues, I learned that Amanda Taylor had received a similar reclassification with a 20% pay cut. Two other employees in their 40s had been moved to different departments with reduced responsibilities. A clear pattern was emerging of older, more experienced staff being systematically devalued. Throughout this investigation phase, I maintained impeccable professional standards. My work continued to be thorough, timely, and exceptional. I was polite, but not obsequious with Richard. I shared required information but volunteered nothing extra. I became a model of professional detachment. Richard seemed to interpret my calm demeanor as resignation or defeat. In meetings, he became increasingly comfortable dismissing my input or talking over me. Each incident was carefully noted in my documentation file. Meanwhile, I scheduled my regular quarterly review meeting with Harriet Chambers. These meetings had always been conducted in person at Chambers Industries headquarters, a tradition Harriet valued for maintaining strong partner relationships. Richard, as expected, immediately inserted himself. "I will attend that meeting with you," he informed me, not bothering to phrase it as a request. "Of course," I replied neutrally. Harriet appreciates meeting all team members involved with her account. What I did not mention was that Harriet also preferred preliminary one-on-one discussions before larger meetings, a practice we had established years ago. I reached out to her assistant, Lauren, to arrange a brief call to prepare for our upcoming review session. This call would be crucial, but I needed to approach it carefully. Ethical considerations weighed heavily on me. I had no intention of bad-mouthing my employer or acting unprofessionally. My goal was not revenge but fairness and professional respect. In the days leading up to both the call and the official review meeting, I prepared exhaustively. I compiled a comprehensive report of all campaign results, innovations, and value-added services my team had provided to Chambers Industries. I analyzed upcoming market challenges and opportunities specific to their product lines. I developed 3 new campaign concepts tailored to their forthcoming product launch. The preparation served dual purposes. It demonstrated my continued value regardless of title or compensation, and it created a stark contrast with Richard's more generic approach to client management. I also began discreetly updating my resume and LinkedIn profile, connecting with former colleagues who had moved to other companies, and researching potential opportunities. Self-preservation required having options if my situation at Apex continued to deteriorate. The morning before my scheduled call with Harriet, Richard stopped by my desk. "I expect a full briefing on your discussion points for the Chambers meeting," he said. "Send me your presentation by end of day for review." "Certainly," I replied. The standard quarterly review template with updated metrics is nearly complete. What I did not mention was that my most innovative ideas and client-specific insights would not be in that document. Those I reserved for my direct conversation with Harriet. As I continued my strategic response, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: anger at the injustice, anxiety about financial pressures, but also a growing sense of empowerment. For years, I had channeled my creativity and strategic thinking into serving clients and building the company. Now I was applying those same skills to advocating for my own value. That evening, as I reviewed my notes for the call with Harriet, I received a text from Brooke. Heard R bragging to B about department cost cutting ahead of schedule. Your name mentioned specifically. Stay strong. The message confirmed what I already suspected. Richard was using my salary reduction as a trophy in his discussions with the CEO. My professional contribution had been reduced to a line item expense successfully minimized. I responded simply, "Thanks," moving forward with the plan. Because while Richard was celebrating his short-term win, he had overlooked something fundamental. Business is built on relationships, not just quarterly numbers, and he was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The preliminary call with Harriet Chambers was scheduled for 9:30 the following morning. I took the call from a small, rarely used meeting room to ensure privacy. When Harriet's face appeared on the screen, I felt a mixture of professional comfort from our long association and anxiety about the conversation ahead. "Alina, good to see you," Harriet said, her direct manner as evident as always. At 63, she had built Chambers Industries through a combination of innovation, strategic risk-taking, and an unerring instinct for people she could trust. "I have been receiving a lot of emails from your new director." "Richard, is it?" "Yes, Richard Phillips," I confirmed. "He joined us 3 months ago following Janet Collins' retirement." Harriet frowned slightly. I was sorry to hear about Janet leaving. She understood our business well. This Richard seems very eager to introduce new approaches. I have received 4 separate emails suggesting we modernize our marketing strategy. This was news to me. Richard had been reaching out to Harriet directly without my knowledge, despite my role as primary account manager. "I see," I said carefully. "Has he shared any specific recommendations?" "More digital advertising, aggressive conversion tactics, reduced investment in the medical education content series," Harriet listed. All presented as if these were revolutionary concepts we had never considered. I maintained my professional composure, though internally I was processing this new information. Richard was not just sidelining me in meetings, he was actively attempting to redirect our longest-standing client relationship without any regard for established strategy or client preferences. "Those approaches can certainly be effective in some contexts," I acknowledged diplomatically. "Though, as you know, our research has consistently shown that for medical devices with your price point and complexity, educational content drives more qualified leads and shorter sales cycles." Harriet nodded. "Which is why we increased the education budget by 30% last year. Our sales team reports physicians spending an average of 40 minutes with the interactive surgical technique guides before contacting our representatives. That level of engagement is gold." The conversation continued with a review of current campaign performance. I presented the latest metrics, all showing strong results from our established strategy. Then, I introduced my new concepts for their upcoming product launch, ideas that built upon our successful foundation while incorporating innovative elements. As we neared the end of our scheduled time, Harriet fixed me with a direct look. "Alina, you seem different today. Is everything all right with the account from your end?" This was the moment of decision. I could maintain a corporate facade or speak truthfully while remaining professional. I chose the latter. "Harriet, I want to assure you that my commitment to Chambers Industries' success remains absolute," I began carefully. "However, there have been some organizational changes at Apex following our acquisition by Monarch Corporation. My role has been reclassified, and Richard's management style differs from Janet's." Harriet, ever perceptive, picked up on my careful phrasing. "Reclassified how, exactly?" "My title has changed from senior marketing specialist to marketing associate, with adjusted responsibilities and compensation," I explained, keeping my tone neutral and factual. Harriet frowned. "That sounds like a demotion for someone with your experience and track record." "The company is realigning positions throughout the organization," I said, sticking to verifiable facts. "I continue to value our working relationship and am committed to maintaining the quality of service Chambers Industries deserves." Harriet's eyes narrowed slightly. After 12 years in business, she could read between the lines. "I look forward to discussing this further at our full meeting tomorrow. I am very interested in understanding how these organizational changes will affect our account management." After we disconnected, I sat quietly for several minutes, processing the conversation. I had walked the fine line between professional loyalty and personal integrity. I had not disparaged Richard or Apex, but I had not hidden the truth either. The next steps would unfold at our official quarterly review. The following morning, Richard was unusually attentive, stopping by my desk as I prepared for the meeting. "I will be leading the presentation today," he informed me. "You can handle the metrics portion in the middle." Of course, I agreed, showing him the standard quarterly report slides. What he did not know was that Harriet typically focused more on the discussion than the formal presentation, often redirecting to specific questions about strategy and implementation. We arrived at Chambers Industries headquarters 15 minutes early. Richard spent the time checking his reflection in his phone camera and reviewing his opening remarks, which I noticed focused heavily on his background with other medical device companies and his vision for elevating our partnership. When we were shown into the conference room, Harriet was already seated at the head of the table, alongside her Chief Marketing Officer, Robert Johnson, and Head of Sales, Stephanie Lewis. She greeted me warmly before turning a more appraising eye to Richard. "Mr. Phillips, good to finally meet in person," she said, her tone cordial but reserved. "Please, call me Richard," he replied with practiced charm. "I have been looking forward to discussing how we can take our partnership to the next level." Harriet nodded noncommittally before turning to me. "Elena, your new campaign concepts for the Neuralace launch are exactly what we needed. Robert has already shared them with product development, and they are quite excited." Richard shot me a quick, confused look. These were the concepts I had presented to Harriet directly, not included in the materials I had shared with him. "Thank you, Harriet," I replied. "The team is eager to begin implementation once we have your final approval." Richard quickly recovered and launched into his presentation. He spoke confidently about outdated approaches that needed refreshing and aggressive growth strategies that would transform results. He repeatedly used phrases like, "as I was telling Elena when presenting ideas that were either industry standard practices we had been implementing for years or, more troublingly, concepts Harriet had specifically rejected in the past." Throughout his presentation, Harriet remained silent, her expression neutral but attentive. Robert and Stephanie exchanged occasional glances, but similarly held their comments. Richard, interpreting their silence as interest rather than assessment, grew increasingly animated. When he reached a slide proposing a 60% reduction in medical education content in favor of high-conversion digital advertising, Harriet finally spoke. "This directly contradicts the strategy we agreed upon last quarter," she observed. "The strategy that has increased our qualified leads by 22%. Richard smiled confidently. "Sometimes we need to challenge established thinking to achieve breakthrough results." "The medical device market is evolving rapidly." "Indeed it is," Harriet agreed. "Which is why we invested heavily in education content that addresses the complex questions surgeons have about new techniques, content that Elena and her team have executed exceptionally well." Richard nodded, as if receiving a compliment. "Elena has done good work within the traditional framework. What I am proposing is a more modern approach that will generate faster returns on your marketing investment." Harriet's expression cooled visibly. "Mr. Phillips, how many years of experience do you have specifically in medical device marketing?" Richard hesitated momentarily. "My experience spans multiple industries, bringing best practices from diverse sectors. So none directly in medical devices," Harriet clarified. "And how many meetings have you had with actual neurosurgeons to understand their decision-making process for adopting new surgical equipment?" "I have reviewed all the market research thoroughly," Richard replied, his confidence faltering slightly. "But no direct conversations with our customer base," Harriet pressed. "My role is strategic direction," Richard explained. "Elena handles those implementation details. I maintain my professional demeanor, though internally, I noted how quickly implementation details had replaced his earlier dismissal of my contributions." Harriet turned to me. "Elena, would you mind stepping out with Robert and Stephanie for a moment? They wanted to discuss the educational webinar series specifics. I would like a few minutes with Mr. Phillips." The request was unusual but clearly deliberate. I nodded and followed Robert and Stephanie from the room. Once outside, Robert smiled sympathetically. Harriet's in full evaluation mode, he commented. She does not like surprises, especially ones that contradict successful strategies. Or people taking credit for other people's work, Stephanie added pointedly. We have all noticed the shift in communication from Apex lately. The quality has been inconsistent at best. We spoke for about 10 minutes about the webinar series before Harriet's assistant indicated we should return to the conference room. When we entered, Richard's earlier confidence had visibly diminished. His posture was stiffer, his smile fixed. Harriet waited until we were all seated before speaking. Thank you all for your patience. I have explained to Mr. Phillips that Chambers Industries values consistency and expertise in our partners. We have built our success on long-term relationships with individuals who thoroughly understand our business. She turned to me. Alina, I would like to speak with you privately after we conclude here, regarding your role moving forward with our account. The remainder of the meeting proceeded, with a noticeably subdued Richard offering minimal comments. When we finished reviewing the quarterly performance metrics, which showed excellent results across all campaigns, Harriet stood to indicate the meeting was ending. Thank you both for coming today. Richard, my assistant will show you to the reception area while Elena and I have our discussion. Richard's attempt to object was cut short by Harriet's raised hand. This is a long-standing practice with our key account managers. I am sure you understand the importance of client preferences. Reluctantly, Richard left with the assistant, shooting me a warning glance as he exited. Once the door closed, Harriet gestured for me to sit closer. Now, she said, all pretense of business formality dropping from her tone, tell me exactly what is happening at Apex. And do not give me the corporate line about realignment and adjusted responsibilities. I have been in business too long for that nonsense. It was the breaking point, the moment when professional reserve gave way to honest communication. I took a deep breath and told Harriet the unvarnished truth. My salary has been cut by 25%, I began, stating the simple fact without emotional coloring. My title has been downgraded, and Richard has been systematically removing my responsibilities and access to strategic planning for our account. Harriet listened intently as I explained the situation in clear, factual terms. I outlined the pattern of experienced employees being marginalized while younger, less experienced staff were brought in at higher compensation rates. I described how Richard had been taking credit for my work and strategies while excluding me from key meetings. This is not just about me, I clarified. Several long-term employees have experienced similar treatment since the Monarch acquisition. There appears to be a deliberate strategy to reduce costs by replacing experienced staff with younger, less expensive employees, regardless of the impact on client relationships and institutional knowledge. Throughout my explanation, I maintained professional composure, focusing on observable patterns rather than subjective interpretations. I did not disparage Richard personally or engage in speculation about motives beyond what was evident in his actions. When I finished, Harriet was silent for several moments, her expression thoughtful. 12 years you have managed our account, correct? Yes, I confirmed. 7 years as the primary contact. And in that time, you have developed a deep understanding of our products, our market position, and our specific challenges, she continued. You have built relationships with our product development team, our sales force, and our executive leadership. I have worked to ensure I can provide the most relevant and effective marketing support possible, I acknowledged. Yet this new director believes all of that accumulated knowledge and relationship capital can be easily replaced by generic industry approaches and someone with no specific experience in our sector, Harriet said, more statement than question. Richard has a different vision for client management, I replied diplomatically. Harriet laughed shortly. A diplomatic answer. But we both know what this is. I have seen it dozens of times in my career. New management comes in, wants quick wins to impress their bosses, and targets experienced staff as expensive overhead without understanding the value of institutional knowledge and client relationships. She leaned forward, her expression serious. Chambers Industries represents what percentage of Apex Solutions revenue? Approximately 40% of total company revenue, I answered. Harriet nodded, as if confirming a decision she had already made. I am going to make a call to your CEO, Mr. Wilson. I believe we need to discuss our expectations for account management and continuity of service. My heart raced at the implications. Harriet, I do not want you to feel obligated to intervene on my behalf. This is not about you personally, Alina, though I value our working relationship, she replied firmly. This is about protecting my company's interests. We chose Apex specifically because of the expertise and continuity you provided. If that is no longer valued by Apex management, then we need to reevaluate our partnership. She picked up her phone and asked her assistant to arrange an immediate call with Bradley Wilson. While we waited, she asked me detailed questions about current projects, upcoming deadlines, and potential risks to Chambers' marketing initiatives given the organizational changes at Apex. Within 15 minutes, her phone rang with Bradley on the line. Harriet put the call on speaker. Bradley, thank you for making time, she began without preamble. I am here with Alina following our quarterly review, and we need to discuss some concerns I have about our account management. Of course, Harriet, Bradley replied, his tone cautiously deferential. Richard mentioned the meeting went well this morning. Did he? Harriet's tone was dry. That's an interesting interpretation. Bradley, I will be direct. I am extremely concerned about the changes in our account management. Alina's role has apparently been diminished, her compensation reduced, and your new director seems intent on implementing generic strategies that we have specifically determined are inappropriate for our market position. There was a moment of silence before Bradley responded. I understand your concerns, Harriet. We are undergoing some organizational adjustments to align with Monarch's corporate structure, but client service remains our top priority. Then you have a significant problem, Harriet stated firmly. Because from where I sit, it appears Apex is willing to sacrifice expertise and proven success for short-term cost-cutting. That is not acceptable for a partnership of our magnitude. What specifically would you like us to address? Bradley asked, his tone now more serious. I expect continuity in our account management, Harriet replied. Specifically, I expect Alina to remain our primary contact with full strategic authority for our campaigns. I expect her expertise to be respected and appropriately compensated. And I expect any strategic changes to be thoroughly discussed and approved by my team before implementation. The implications were clear. Maintain the relationship as it had been, or risk losing Chambers Industries as a client. I appreciate your candor, Harriet, Bradley said carefully. Would you be available for a video conference at 3 this afternoon to discuss this further? I would like to include Richard in that conversation so we can address all concerns directly. I will make myself available, Harriet agreed. And I expect Elena to be included as well. After the call ended, Harriet turned to me. This may be uncomfortable for you, Elena, but it is necessary. In my 63 years, I have learned that business relationships require occasional recalibration, particularly when new players enter the field. I nodded, feeling both grateful for her support and anxious about the confrontation ahead. I appreciate your confidence in me. It is earned, not given, she replied simply. Now, let us prepare for this afternoon's discussion. We spent the next hour outlining specific examples of successful strategies, quantifying the value of continuity in account management, and identifying risks in Richard's proposed approach. By the time we finished, I felt prepared for whatever might come. Richard was visibly tense when I returned to the reception area. What did she say to you? He demanded as we walked to the car. Harriet had questions about the educational content series implementation, I replied, revealing nothing about the larger conversation or the upcoming meeting. Back at the office, I received an urgent meeting request for 3 o'clock in the executive conference room. Richard received the same invitation moments later, his expression darkening as he read it. At precisely 3, Bradley Wilson's face appeared on the conference room screen, with Harriet joining on a separate video feed. Richard sat across from me, his posture rigid with barely contained tension. "Thank you all for making time for this important discussion," Bradley began. "Harriet has raised some significant concerns about our account management approach for Chambers Industries." Harriet did not waste time with pleasantries. "To be clear, Bradley, my concern is that Apex appears to be systematically devaluing the very expertise and relationship management that made us choose you as our marketing partner. Alina has been instrumental in our successful campaigns for 7 years. Her understanding of our products and market is unparalleled. Yet I understand she has been reclassified, had her compensation reduced by 25%, and is being sidelined in strategic planning." Richard immediately jumped in. "With all due respect, Harriet, internal staffing decisions are based on comprehensive evaluation of skills alignment with our evolving service model. Alina continues to play a role in your account management. A diminished role," Harriet corrected, "and your evolving service model appears to prioritize generic approaches over proven, customized strategies that have delivered exceptional results for us." Bradley looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Harriet, I assure you client satisfaction remains our highest priority." "Then demonstrate it," Harriet challenged. "Because from my perspective, it appears cost-cutting has become your highest priority, even at the expense of expertise and relationship continuity." "That is absolutely not the case," Richard insisted. "Our organizational changes are designed to bring fresh perspectives and innovative approaches to all client relationships. I do not want fresh perspectives that ignore 7 years of market learning," Harriet replied firmly. "I want the consistent excellence and deep understanding that Elena and her team have provided. And quite frankly, if that is no longer available at Apex, then we will need to reconsider our marketing partnership." The implied threat hung in the air. 40% of company revenue at risk. Bradley cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss specific expectations moving forward." "That is simple," Harriet stated. "I expect Elena to be restored to her previous position with appropriate title and compensation. I expect her to have full strategic authority for our account. And I expect any major strategic shifts to be thoroughly vetted with my team before implementation." Richard attempted one more defense. "Harriet, I believe Elena may have misrepresented some aspects of our organizational changes. Her role adjustment was part of a broader realignment, not a targeted action. It was a desperate move, attempting to undermine my credibility." Before I could respond, Harriet cut in. "Interesting theory, Richard. Perhaps you could explain why multiple experienced staff have been similarly realigned while new, younger employees have been hired at premium rates? Or why you have repeatedly taken credit for Elena's strategies in your communications with me? Or why you proposed implementing approaches I specifically rejected last quarter?" Richard's face flushed as he realized Harriet had more information than he anticipated. Bradley, seeing the conversation deteriorating, stepped in. "I think we need to take Harriet's concerns very seriously. The Chambers Industries relationship is fundamentally important to Apex." He turned to face me directly through the video call. "Elena, would you be willing to meet with me tomorrow morning to discuss your role and how we can ensure continuity for the Chambers account?" "Of course," I replied professionally, maintaining my composure despite the dramatic shift in dynamics. "Excellent," Harriet said. "I will expect an update by the end of the week on how these issues have been resolved. And to be perfectly clear, Bradley, resolution means Elena returns to her previous status with full strategic authority for our account. Anything less would indicate Apex no longer values our partnership as we have understood it." After the call ended, Richard stormed out without a word. I remained seated, processing the extraordinary turn of events. Years of building trust and delivering value had created a foundation strong enough to withstand an attempt to undermine my position. It was a powerful reminder that in business, relationships and results ultimately matter more than internal politics. The following morning, I met with Bradley in his office, bringing a comprehensive portfolio documenting my contributions, client feedback, and financial results generated through my account management. I presented the information factually, without embellishment or emotional appeals. I have always been committed to Apex's success, I concluded. My concern with the recent changes was not about title or personal recognition, but about maintaining the level of service and expertise our clients expect and deserve. Bradley nodded thoughtfully. Richard presented your reclassification as part of a necessary cost reduction initiative. I see now that the potential cost of losing your expertise far outweighs any short-term savings. By the end of our meeting, Bradley had made his decision. I would be promoted to Director of Key Accounts, a position above my previous role, with responsibility for our most valuable client relationships. My compensation would be restored and increased by 15% to reflect the expanded responsibilities. Richard would no longer have direct authority over client strategy for my accounts. As I left Bradley's office, I felt a complex mixture of vindication, relief, and renewed purpose. The system had corrected itself, not through confrontation or ultimatums on my part, but through the natural consequences of attempting to devalue expertise and relationships that had been built over years of dedicated service. The reversal was complete, and with it came an important lesson about professional value that would guide the next phase of my career. The weeks following my promotion to Director of Key Accounts brought significant changes to Apex Solutions. Bradley Wilson, now acutely aware of the risks in Richard's approach, initiated a comprehensive review of all recent realignments. Amanda Taylor, who had also suffered a pay cut, was restored to her previous compensation level and given expanded responsibilities in client education development. Richard maintained his title as Marketing Director, but his authority was significantly reduced. He now reported directly to me for all strategy decisions regarding key accounts, a reversal that he accepted with thinly veiled resentment. In meetings, he became notably subdued, his previous confidence replaced by cautious deference, particularly when Chambers Industries was discussed. My first official act as director was to conduct individual meetings with every team member to understand their perspectives, concerns, and ideas. Unlike Richard's approach of dismissing experienced staff as outdated, I recognize that effective leadership requires valuing diverse viewpoints and expertise. Your institutional knowledge is an asset, not a liability, I told Amanda during our meeting. The campaigns you developed for Medtronic last year outperformed industry benchmarks by 30%. That comes from understanding their products and challenges at a deep level. For newer team members like Kyle, I provided mentoring and context rather than pitting them against more experienced colleagues. Your technical skills in digital analytics are exceptional, I acknowledged. Paired with Amanda's product knowledge, we can create campaigns that are both innovative and grounded in market realities. This collaborative approach quickly began showing results. Team morale improved, and with it, the quality of our client deliverables. The artificial divide between legacy staff and new talent dissolved as we emphasized complementary strengths rather than competition. I also instituted weekly strategy sessions where team members from different experience levels and specialties collaborated on client challenges. These sessions produced some of our most innovative campaign concepts, combining fresh technical approaches with deep industry understanding. My relationship with Harriet Chambers evolved as well. With my expanded authority, I could implement the strategic vision we had developed together without unnecessary interference. Our quarterly reviews became productive discussions of future opportunities rather than defenses of established approaches. This is the partnership I always valued, Harriet commented during our first meeting after my promotion. Mutual respect and collaborative thinking. As for Richard, his situation became increasingly untenable. Without the ability to demonstrate quick wins through cost-cutting, his promised performance metrics remained unmet. His attempts to find new targets for realignment were blocked by Bradley, who had learned a costly lesson about valuing expertise. 3 months after my promotion, Richard resigned to pursue other opportunities, a face-saving arrangement that benefited everyone. On his last day, he stopped by my office, his expression a mixture of resignation and lingering resentment. "You won this round," he said. "But the industry is moving toward younger, more adaptable talent. Experience has a limited shelf life." I smiled, feeling no need to gloat or argue. "I wish you success in your next role, Richard." The best teams value both innovation and experience. I hope you find that balance. After he left, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The salary cut that had seemed like a devastating blow had ultimately led to an opportunity for growth and leadership I might not have pursued otherwise. The challenge had forced me to recognize and advocate for my own value in ways that comfort never would have required. My mother noticed the change during our weekly Sunday visit. "You seem different," Diana observed as we sat in the garden of her care facility. "More confident. I had to fight for my position," I explained, sharing the story with her for the first time. It made me realize how much I had been taking for granted, both my own value and the stability I thought came with loyalty and performance. She nodded, her eyes reflecting wisdom earned through her own life challenges. "Sometimes we need to be shaken out of comfort to discover our strength. You always had this in you, Elena. You just needed the right moment to recognize it." Beyond the professional victory, I had learned profound lessons about workplace dynamics and personal value. First, performance alone is not enough. In the modern workplace, you must be able to articulate your value and make it visible to decision makers. The years I spent quietly delivering exceptional results without ensuring proper recognition had left me vulnerable when leadership changed. Second, relationships matter more than titles. The trust and respect I had built with Harriet Chambers proved more powerful than any organizational chart or cost-cutting mandate. In a business landscape often focused on quarterly metrics, human connection remains the most durable competitive advantage. Third, patience and strategy triumph over emotional reactions. Had I resigned in anger or confronted Richard unprofessionally, the outcome would likely have been very different. By maintaining dignity and choosing calculated responses over impulsive ones, I preserved both my reputation and my options. Most importantly, I learned that knowing your worth is not arrogance but essential self-preservation. For too long, I had equated humility with downplaying my contributions. True professional confidence comes not from demanding recognition, but from calmly and factually demonstrating value. 6 months after my promotion, I received an email from Kyle, the younger employee Richard had hired. "I want to thank you for your mentorship," he wrote. "When Richard hired me, he encouraged competition over collaboration. Your approach of valuing different perspectives has taught me more about effective marketing than any strategy he promoted." That message, more than the title or compensation, validated the leadership philosophy I had developed through adversity. By refusing to perpetuate the toxicity I had experienced, I had helped create a more supportive and ultimately more productive work environment. Today, 2 years later, Apex Solutions has grown its client base by 30%. Our reputation for combining innovative approaches with deep industry expertise has made us a preferred partner for healthcare companies nationwide. The team I lead includes both experienced professionals and emerging talent, each valued for their unique contributions. As for me, the 25% salary cut that once threatened my financial stability has been replaced by compensation 40% higher than my original level, reflecting both my expanded responsibilities and the value I bring to the organization. But the most significant change cannot be measured in titles or dollars. It lies in the confidence I carry into every meeting, every negotiation, and every challenge. The knowledge that my worth is not determined by someone else's assessment, but by the genuine value I create through expertise, relationships, and results. When faced with workplace injustice or devaluation, the easy path is often resignation or bitter conflict. The harder but ultimately more rewarding approach is to strategically advocate for your worthwhile, continuing to deliver exceptional value. It requires patience, documentation, and the cultivation of allies who recognize your contributions. My journey from that devastating moment in Richard's office to my current leadership role reminds me daily that career setbacks, however painful, often contain the seeds of greater opportunity when approached with strategic thinking and professional integrity. Have you ever faced a similar situation where your value was questioned despite your contributions? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your stories and strategies in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with anyone navigating workplace challenges. Remember, knowing your worth is the first step toward having others recognize it too. Thank you for listening, and wishing you the confidence to advocate for your value in all professional settings.